Hey, what is up, you guys? It is Kat, and today I have a very special guest. Actually, let me just take a step back and just mention that again, we're back with our brand new ERP series. What does that mean? It means, well, obviously, if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you'll likely know what ERP means. But if you don't, no worries. ERP, when I say ERP, it stands for Enterprise Resource Planning, which is the bulk of my career and also Andy's career. And so we thought it would be fun to throw together a series where we interview people who have been very experienced or are very experienced in implementing ERP systems. And so it's not going to be necessarily technology specific. Some of them are, we got technical architects that are coming down I want to say coming down the pipe, but they're scheduled for a chat later on in the future. But really, the point of this whole entire series is to equip you, the listener, with some wisdom for either participating in an ERP implementation, or perhaps you're a product owner in that you are considering an ERP implementation, or you're a consultant and you just want to enhance, grab some more skills and tools and techniques for your tool belt when you're helping out your clients. Take whatever you will from this podcast. Today, my very special guest is Frederique Oberlin, OCM extraordinaire. And so OCM, Organizational Change Management, really, really excited to have you. Fred has been in the industry for 19 years. She and I were on a project recently where she did an extraordinary job in helping the organization literally transform from essentially I don't want to say mom and pop shop, because they're a big shop, right? But they did not have, they came from a world where they didn't have an ERP and they didn't have a centralized system. And so there is a lot of learning that they had to go through in order to both equip their people with the right tools and the right, sort of roadmap, and help them sort of engage in what that new world would look like. And it's often a very scary one, right? And that is a whole entire point of organizational change management. So welcome, Fred. Really excited to have you. Did you want to, I feel like I didn't really give you a good enough intro. Is there anything else that you want to augment your experience?
Sure. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. I've been working in and around ERP implementations for a really long time, and I've held lots of different roles. So I started as more of a technical BA, supporting the business, working, as that bridge between the business and usually external consultants. And I've done everything under the sun, from sort of testing, requirements gathering, to training, and now more into the organizational change management space. So feel free to ask me anything in that area. I've seen and done lots.
Excellent. So when I say, organizational change management, I don't want to say that it's a buzzword, but it's hard to understand and sort of wrap your mind. Like, what's the scope? Yeah, we've got this new system, and yeah, we've got to train our people. But it's really more than and then tell people, let's issue a communication that you've got your new system coming down the pipe. Yeah. So here's what to expect. But there's so much more to organizational change management, and there's so many different aspects that you are obviously experienced in handling. So what are some of those items that, I'm just going to get right into it, like what are some things that organizations, leadership particularly, don't really either think about or take for granted in a new system?
So let me back up just a second and talk about how I view organizational change management. And it's sort of similar to what's presented in training courses, if you've taken any courses in OCM, but it's really about the people side of a software implementation. So we're all really used to very sort of traditional implementations, right? We have a project manager we bring in some techie folks, we do some configuration, we have a product, and we say we're going live. But we really have started to understand more recently that it's important that we bring people along for that project as well, the end users, and that wait till the project to say, okay, end users, here's your solution. You got to go, you got to use this thing. But we need to bring them along through that whole project life cycle so that they're aware of what's coming, they can decide to participate in what's coming, and they can really increase their use and adoption of that solution so that when go live happens, they're actually ready and you're actually able to achieve the ROI you set out to achieve when you did this big project and spent all of the money.
Okay, but
So,
hold on. These are employees, and so they
yeah.
don't necessarily really have a choice in getting aboard the system, right?
Yes and no, because we also know, right, that shadow IT is a real problem. And we know that people will go in and they will do what they're comfortable with. So I've been part of lots of organizations, and I'm sure you have too, where you come in and there's maybe a legacy ERP. And one
Mm,
of the first things we talk about is how are you using your legacy ERP? And we
mm,
find out from these organizations that, well, they're not. People have moved away from the old ERP and they're working in Excel, or they've
hmm.
built access databases, or they're doing things on pen and paper again. So we know that people can step away from their ERP even when they're employees, and even when it would seem like the most logical thing in the world to say, well, of course,
Right,
you have to use this solution, right? People
right.
actually don't, and they will turn away from it, and they will create their own processes and their own practices, sometimes outside of that system, which is unfortunate.
That's interesting. So, is that what you mean by shadow IT?
Yeah, so shadow
Okay,
IT is that idea that people will go and create their own systems, their own processes, their
right.
own ways of doing things outside of what may be a company standard or even what may be outside of a technical IT solution. So a great example of this in maybe I don't want to say a mom and pop shop, but a more junior organization, maybe that doesn't have the IT maturity of like a
Hmm.
big company,
Hmm.
might be that someone goes out and buys their own app that they see online and they start using their own app. Or maybe they use
Okay,
the Microsoft suite and they start building their own Power Apps to do things,
right.
right?
That's
It's not
interesting.
necessarily standard. One department may have done it completely in isolation,
Right.
but they've done their own thing.
So why
And
is
it
that
can
bad?
become, it isn't always bad, but what you start to see is inefficiencies in ways that you're doing things. So
Mm,
maybe one team is really efficient in something, whereas another department who's doing the same thing isn't aware of what's going on and they
right.
don't know how to use it. It can also go all the way to the other end, the other extreme, where maybe someone has built something outside of IT or a governing group knowing about it. And now a large portion of the business, maybe a huge portion of your revenue or something is cycling through a system that's offline, that's not backed up,
Oh,
that's not controlled or managed.
right, right. So how do you detect that shadow IT is going on?
So usually you find out when you start a project like this, you start
Mm,
interviewing stakeholders and you start understanding your current state and you
okay.
start doing a little bit of investigative digging around, okay, well, how are we doing things today?
Right.
And in the OCM space, we start to dig into that stuff when we talk to people and say, how is your world going to change when we go to
Right.
this new system? And we might have conversations that would include, oh, well, I'm going to move away from using this XYZ app into this.
Okay.
And then lots of times that sort of brings it up and we say, wait a minute, what is that XYZ app or what is this thing? And
Right.
I don't want to give the impression that it happens all the time or it's common. Sometimes it's as much as people creating an app, but sometimes it's small things like, oh, I'm going to step away from doing this calculation in the system because I don't know how to
Mm,
use the system. I'm going to go dump my data, manipulate it in Excel, load it back up. That's still a
100%.
deviation from standard process, and it takes a lot of time and energy for people to do those kinds of things.
You know what, you have captured that. I will bet you more often than not, there is somebody or a group of people or some sort of function in finance that will do exactly that.
100%. And maybe it's because the legacy system doesn't work the way someone needs it to. And
Mm,
maybe it doesn't work because it's outdated, or maybe it doesn't work because someone didn't know that you can put in a ticket or get these kinds of things resolved.
right.
Maybe someone never spoke up about their requirements or what they needed the system to do. right? Which we
Right.
hear a lot of. Or somebody
Yes.
said, oh, well, my IT, governance process takes a long time. It's slow. I can go whip up this macro, or I can build this quick, query
Mm-hmm.
on my own, and that saves me time. So there's
Mm-hmm.
lots of reasons people do that. I firmly believe people generally come to work every day wanting to do their best. They want to be successful. They want to do what they need to do and go home at the end of the day feeling good, right?
You're a
So,
half glass kind of full, glass
yes,
full kind of person,
yeah,
definitely, huh?
yeah. So I mean, people
I
aren't
would agree. I
maliciously
would agree.
trying to do this. They're not trying to do
Mm-hmm.
shady things, but they have to get a job done, and they have to get it done quickly.
Right.
So, when we start to have these conversations about what's changing in a system, we need to understand why they're doing some of the things they're doing so we know how to make sure the new system meets their needs, and how do we get them training so that they
Right.
know how to leverage the new system moving forward.
Right. So often I feel like it would be maybe there ought to be some analysis because maybe the new system isn't better. Like in
Mhm.
some points, in some
Yeah.
parts, right? On the whole, organizations get an ERP system in so that they can move to that next level in efficiency and operate at that higher level and deliver better service or like operate like scale up essentially,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
what do you normally do to sort of balance out the old way is good. We don't necessarily want to wag the dog, if you get what I'm saying, like wag the dog with the new system and force this new way that is actually harder than the old. Like how do you balance that?
Yeah, so really it's understanding how is this system going to change things for all these different groups and players,
Mm,
and really starting to tell a story and paint a picture through comms and through meetings, through OCM tools of what changes for the better for the majority, right? And really being able to say, look, I know you in billing might have to do 2 extra steps, but payroll, let's say, is going to have these 5 benefits, and it's going to mean you
mm,
get your paycheck faster, which is important to you at the end of the day. So it's about that balance and about trying to make sure people understand the bigger picture, right? It's not
I
just
love
saying,
it.
here's how you're going to do your little transactions. It's how does what you do in your department fit into the whole? And how do you become part of this successful project?
Right, right. I love how you said that because absolutely it is on the whole. So, okay, so in speaking on the whole, and sort of segues into my next question. So, earlier you had mentioned um, getting more, getting your ROI more efficiently. I'm paraphrasing, obviously, here. And so, to me, whenever I hear, let's get your ROI more efficiently, again, paraphrasing. I always think
Yeah.
that that's a beauty pageant answer. And whether or not that actually happens, nobody can prove. So first of all, are you able to are you able to prove that having good like what are the KPIs or what are the metrics that you would use to gauge whether or not an organization is in fact getting a faster return on investment?
So with my OCM hat on,
Mm,
I want to look at metrics around training. So what did
okay.
people think of the training that they received? Are they coming back for more training, for repeat training? Are they actually able to, what do our tickets look like after go live? Are we getting
Ah,
a lot of
tickets.
tickets on
Okay.
things that should have been captured in training? Are we
Right.
getting, tickets based on functionality that we maybe didn't implement? How is that looking? And things like that post go live that would let us know how we did, not only with our implementation and our training, but also how's our solution shaping up? Is the solution doing all the things we said it was going to do, or are people still having trouble with the solution? So again, for me with my OCM hat, I'm not looking, I don't want to spend as much time looking at metrics like, did we improve cash flow, or did we, those are things that probably the project manager would be more focused on, or my product owners in their departments. I
Okay.
want to look at some of the things around how are people doing with the system after go live? How
Okay.
are they utilizing the system? And then through, stakeholder interviews and things like that, finding out, are we still going outside of the system for any of our processes? some of those things around, have we improved cash flow? Have we improved, PO counts or those technical things to the technical folks?
Right.
With my OCM hat on, I'd be more concerned about how are people doing post go live? Are they still
Mm.
submitting a lot of tickets? Are they still having a lot of challenges in using the system? And then maybe through stakeholder interviews and checking in with people, are they using the system for the things that we want them to be using it for? Or are they still finding, hey, I can't run these reports, I'm dumping data to Excel and things
Okay,
like
so
that.
how do you, sorry, just to like dig into this a little bit further, would
Yeah,
you capture that data versus in forums, in surveys? Like, what's the method that you would use to capture that
it'd be a mix of
feedback?
things probably. And I think it depends on which organization you're working for and
Mm.
what the communication tools you feel would work best in that organization, right? So usually in a project, as you move through, you'll figure out what the organization prefers, what works best. And I'd
Mm.
say use whatever tools you've determined during your implementation, post-implementation, to just keep measuring that, right?
Gotcha.
Because I think it's important that we don't just, nobody just goes home on go live day, right? We stick around afterwards and we have to hand over the project and we have to make sure it continues to work for people.
Yeah, 100%. So interesting that many of your metrics, or I guess most, if not all of the metrics that you had mentioned thus far, are implemented or would be gathered measured after go live. But how do you
Mhm.
know, like that's kind of like, okay, so we've already got the system after at go live, like we can't, deviate. So how do we bring that back to be more proactive, perhaps during the implementation or even before the implementation, that we can ensure that we're steering the organization in the right direction?
Right. So um, it depends on which change management sort of methodology you're using. I'm certified in ProSci methodology. So in the ProSci methodology, we talk a lot about the ADKAR journey that people take.
Okay.
So this is the journey that each individual person moves through on their way through an implementation. So we start by building awareness. So what are we up to with this project? And once people are aware of what's going on, we move into desire, which is then saying, okay, here's what happens for you. Here's how you become part of this journey. And here's what this means for your job. And people make that sort of personal commitment to say, okay, I want to be a part of this. I'm on the bus. I get it. Then we move into knowledge, which is what we would consider our training phase,
Training,
right?
right?
This is when we're in classroom where we're doing e-learning and we're really teaching people now, okay, here's how you start to figure out what transactions you're going to do. Here's when you get into the system for the first time.
Right.
Once we get past that, we have to keep working on building our ability. So that's now go live, right? You've actually gotten the system. You actually have hands on keys. You're getting to do these things in real life and practice and build up your confidence. And then at the end of that, we want to work on the R, reinforcement. So great, we did this and we made it through. How are we doing? How are we going to hold these things up? How are we going to transfer this over to the business? So all this hard work we did with the project doesn't just fade away.
Mm.
So in this ADKAR journey, there's some tools we can use like assessments or survey questions, and we can actually measure where people are on their personal change journey. And if we see that there's issues, we can start to adapt or modify our approach depending on what we find in our surveys and our results.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
So okay, so digging deeper a little bit, how the new world would impact each and every person in each and every job. That seems like a whole ton of work. What?
Yeah, so it's not necessarily down to the individual person level.
Oh, okay.
Usually, what you're going to do when you start is you're going to come in and figure out, okay, what's the lay of the land here within my organization?
Mm,
And who does my ERP or this project impact? So maybe I'm just implementing, the payroll module of an ERP. So my stakeholders might be the HR department, the payroll department, and my managers and end user employees.
mhm.
Or perhaps I'm doing a major ERP and I'm implementing, a lot of modules. Now I might be impacting HR, procurement, supply chain, contracts. So you have to do a little bit of analysis on who your stakeholder groups are,
Right.
and then decide how do you want to slice and dice your organization. Are you going to look at it sort of department by department? Are you going to look at it by geographic branch? It might vary depending on
Mm,
how your organization is set up. But as a change manager, you will work with your, stakeholders, your project team members to figure out what makes the most sense. So you'll be collecting results at an individual person level, but you're usually aggregating them or analyzing them at the group level. So then
Gotcha.
okay, and this may be payroll implementation. Payroll's solid, they've moved through this milestone, but HR is having some trouble. I need to figure out what's going on there and focus in on that team.
I see, I see. Now you mentioned this is fascinating. I mean, I've spent a long time as a business analyst, and I don't actually have a whole lot of insight to organizational change management. I can support it for sure.
Mhm.
Like if you want training build, that's me, but this is sort of a whole different world than just regular business analysis,
Yeah.
right? And so you had mentioned earlier on in the in our conversation something, I think it was hypercare.
Mhm.
So hypercare is, I feel like it's a recent buzzword that I've been hearing in the last number of years. Like I've been implementing ERP for, you know, like 20 plus years. And only in the last perhaps 3 or 4 years did I ever hear the term hypercare. Now, conceptually, I know what it is, right? It's like go live support. But
Yeah.
why do we call it hypercare, and what is it? Like, is there something that, what should we look? Tell us about hypercare.
So it's funny you say that because I heard about hypercare, was introduced to it on my very first system implementation, which
Really?
I'm going to date myself now, would have been back in like 2004, 2005.
Oh my.
So that was a thing in the space I was working in way back then. So for me, when I think about hypercare, I'm thinking about that period right after go live,
Hmm.
where people are first days hands on keys in the new system, and you're going to get a spike in tickets.
Mm,
Right? You're going to get a spike in people saying, what do I do? My login doesn't work. I don't know how to do this transaction. That training you signed me up for and I didn't attend, help. I need to get back in
mm,
there. What are we going to do? So it's really that like first couple of weeks, couple of days, depending on the size of your implementation, that your project team is really holding the hands of everyone in the business and giving them extra support. So you're not just saying, go contact the help desk. You're maybe setting up a specialized help desk, or you're bypassing help desk to get straight to the experts to get your tickets triaged and supported right away.
gotcha.
So that to me is usually what I would refer to as hypercare, that
Mm.
immediate post go live period.
So do you have people situated geographically, or is it, I mean, obviously it depends on the organization for sure. But what does it
Yeah.
actually, like, what does it look like?
So for me, I think one of the best examples of one that I've been a part of is when we actually had people who were our super users. So they maybe came from the business, they were maybe product owners or they were testers. They were involved in some training delivery. They became part of the hypercare team. And we actually sent them out we bought them t-shirts, branded t-shirts with, support teams. So it was very like on brand. It
Nice.
was fun. And we sent them out to some of our field sites at the time at the company I was working for, just to be a physical presence in that location during those first few days.
Gotcha.
That was really important for us at that time because people were really nervous and we wanted them to know that you don't have to just go to a ticket or to an email. There's a human being here that you can talk to, and even if that human being isn't doing a lot of help, it's a calming presence to support. So I think some of the best implementations I've been part of is when you leverage that personal
Mm,
connection and
right,
have some people around in the business to talk to and to say, hey, we've got this, let's figure this out together.
right. Like
So, but it can vary.
champions.
Yeah, it can vary depending on your organization, right? If your organization is maybe a lot of people who are very used to working from home, very used to submitting tickets or working virtually, it could be a virtual setup as well. I think it just is really important that you work with your project team and with your leadership team to understand early on in your project what that's going to look like and what the expectation is so you can start to gear up for it ahead of time.
Okay. And what does early mean to you?
I mean, excuse me. I don't think you can ever do things too early on projects, right? I think once you sort of start development and you're starting to test, you should be starting to think about what that looks like, because it does take some time to train people on what's expected of them. It takes some time to work with IT to modify ticketing systems or to make sure service desk knows how they're going to react in these times. So I think it's something that, should be put on the radar very early on in a project, at least with the project manager as a placeholder, and talked about in earnest by the time you're testing. And when you're rounding out your testing phases, you should have a concrete plan and be ready to enable that plan.
Okay,
In my
that's really
opinion.
okay. Yeah, that's of course that's that's the reason why we want your opinion. So you're the expert. Um,
Yeah.
you've given
Training.
us imparted so much wisdom. I'm so grateful for this.
Yeah.
Um, in I don't want to take up too much of your time because I know it's very valuable. What are the two, I would say top two most important, let's go with three. What are the top three most important things that a leadership, like key roles in leadership, should be looking for when they embark on OCM?
So as leaders, are we talking about like C-suite sponsor level leaders?
Yeah, yeah. Or even like the layer below that. So C-suite and then below. Just one
Right.
layer below. Yeah, like
So what are the
directorship
top
type thing.
three things they should be thinking about? I think one of the big things is that they should have clear communication with their change manager and their project manager about what their expectations are around communications, around in-person time, and support. Um,
For like
the
after go
reason
live or during implementation?
during and after go live.
Okay.
So I think lots of times people have ideas or opinions or think they have an idea in their mind of how they would like to see it go, and it doesn't always get verbalized because we
Mm,
get so busy with the technical pieces of a project. The change management stuff kind of plugs along in the background, and then you hit 11th hour and you've got your hypercare plan and you maybe were going to go one direction, but then let's say executives say, you know what, no, we need people on the ground.
right.
So have those conversations very candidly, very openly with your change manager and your project team early. If you have a very specific idea as a leader because you know your business and you know your people, let's talk about it. Let's get it out on the table and figure out what we need to do to make that a reality.
Right, right. Okay. And so that's
Mhm.
so would that be this first and
I think
second
that's
two?
I think that's to me a number one.
Okay.
Um, you know, maybe a one and two.
Yeah.
I think the second thing is, don't underestimate what's going to be required for training
Mm,
and how you're going to enable getting your people realistically into training and into the volume of training that's going to be required,
right.
right? So again, I think training is one of those things that always sneaks up on us.
Mm,
We go, we're developing, we're testing, and then all of a sudden we're ready to train. And in some cases, we might need people from the business to be sitting in 10, 15, 20 hours of training. And lots of times we expect people in some cases to be doing training while they're doing their regular jobs.
wow.
So again, I think leaders having candid conversations with OCM leaders and project managers early on about what's the volume of training coming? How are we going to actually make sure that our people can attend, can be focused, can give it the attention it needs, and can be present for it?
Right.
How do we alleviate that pressure on our people so that we're not expecting them to sort of still be doing their job and have one ear on training, right?
Because that's, I mean, that kind of like they have to do their day-to-day job in
Yep,
addition to that, right?
yep, exactly. So I've seen companies hire temps or backfill key
Mm,
roles or staff up a little bit extra for maybe a 3-month period. There's lots of different
gotcha.
ways to do that, but lots of times it's a people powered solution and it needs a little more lead time.
Right.
So, don't wait on that. Don't sleep on that.
That's really, really great insight because I feel like that's like often organizations just, just hold their people accountable for the new system and they don't actually give it a whole lot of thought that they have to keep
Exactly.
the lights on, right?
Yeah.
The operation going. Yeah.
Yeah. And lots of times, if you're moving from a legacy ERP to a new ERP, you're
Mm,
dealing with a system that doesn't work optimally anyway. So you're probably doing a lot of grinding, right? You're doing
Yes.
a lot of hours, you're doing a lot of extra work just to make things happen.
Right.
Yes, the new system is right around the corner, and yes, it's going to be easier, but you're still doing that day job that's quite often
Mm-hmm.
really difficult.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what is the
Yeah.
third thing, the third and final thing, that piece
Um,
of gold nugget that you would like to impart?
I think, OCM and change management training, it's not just a passive activity. It's really an activity that leaders need to be a part of, and they need to
Okay.
have some skin in the game. So, I think I've been fortunate to be part of a project where the project manager I was working with really valued change management and really
Mm-hmm.
let me be an equal at the table and have an equal voice. That doesn't always happen in projects, but that doesn't mean that the OCM person or team doesn't still need support. So as leaders, you need to make sure that you're reaching out to that OCM person and you're providing support. And the way I mean that is, you know, as an OCM person, I can issue communications all day long, or I can go attend meetings with people, but it doesn't hold as much power as when their leader or a C-suite
100%.
person comes to the table and delivers that message, right?
Yeah.
It takes it away from that idea that this is something that's being done to people to this is something we're going through together. And that's
Together.
really
That's right.
important. Yeah.
The together piece is the key, isn't
Yep,
it?
absolutely. And again, like some of the best implementations I've been a part of, I remember one organization we were in, we were doing our training with finance, and we were doing, technical hands-on like month-end activities in a test environment. And our CFO, sorry, actually came in and sat in training for the entire
Excellent.
duration and did the transactions. And it became like really powerful. And, yeah, we had a lot of fun with it and a lot of jokes about, oh, if we ever see so and so in the system banging out journal entries, we should be worried. But it made it that much more personal, right? And people
Right.
could see, oh, this CFO, he's a really big deal, but he's doing the transactions with me and he gets it and he knows what I'm going through.
That is
It's
so
powerful.
powerful. That it's like that is a sign of really great leadership.
Yeah,
That, you're with the team and you're one part of it. You're eating what they eat.
absolutely. Yeah. And in a pinch, you now know how to do the transactions. Things get tough, you can
Added
get
bonus. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Indeed. Well, I
Yeah.
want to thank you so, so much for sharing so many great nuggets and giving us such valuable insight on organizational change management. It is absolutely a necessity for every successful ERP implementation. Do you have any final comments that you would like to share with our listeners today?
No, nothing that I can think of right now. I mean, I again appreciate the opportunity to chat about it. And, I think it's just so great that people are recognizing that people side of a project journey is just as important as the technical delivery. So happy to talk
100%.
about it anytime.
So great, so great. So I'd be inclined to include your LinkedIn profile. Would you be okay with that? Okay, so if you want, I'm not necessarily. I mean, I'm sure that if you reach out to Fred through LinkedIn, I mean, I think you have to be connected with her. But anyways, whatever.
No,
You can figure it out.
I think there's a way now because I just upgraded to a premium account. So
Oh, you did? Okay, perfect.
yeah.
So if you have any direct questions, perhaps if you wanted to reach out to Fred, if you're okay with that, I don't want you to get inundated with these, you're gonna have to charge for the $1 a question. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's way more than $1 a question. We're gonna do that. But I will include her LinkedIn profile in the description below. And thank you again, Fred. It was really, really great to have you and looking forward to chatting with you soon.